Hey there, sorry it took me so long to finally get this video up that I mentioned on Thursday, I think it was, when I posted my most recent video about atheism and reason. I said I was going to be posting a video about the Trinity, and I wrote up what I was going to be saying on Thursday, but I didn't get a chance to actually record and put it up, so sorry about that. But I did want to share a thought that I've had this last week. I've been listening to a lot of commentary, a lot of Bible study, I guess you could say, on the Trinity and different answers that Christians have. So this is specifically, I guess, for Christians who've wrestled with the issue of the Trinity. And at face value, it is a difficult thing to understand, but I think when we study it, we look at it as being something so complex that we kind of overlook simpler ways to describe the Trinity, and we go for this really compound, complex description that isn't really necessary, and in the process of doing that, it seems like we get a mixed up idea of what the Trinity actually is. So this thought came to me, and I think it is in line with biblical teaching, but it is definitely a different way of looking at the Trinity, and I want to hear what other Christians on this would actually think, and what anyone else would really think, because I know especially people who are outside of the Christian faith just see the Trinity being three in one as just a blatant contradiction, and there's no way of getting around it, that you can't have both three and be one being at the same time. And obviously it's an issue that a lot of people have wrestled with or thought about. I know especially from the Islamic community, that's a key point that they bring up in debates with Christians, is that they think that we believe in a polytheistic God instead of just a monotheistic God, or monotheism. So I wrote up this little essay that I actually posted on Facebook, and got some feedback on it from there, and most people seem to like it. So I just wanted to read what I wrote. It's actually pretty short, so this shouldn't be that long of a video. But I'll just get right into it. It's called "Traversing Through the Trinity." God is and always will be beyond our capacity to fully understand. We can spend our entire lives studying the attributes and the character of God, yet still not be able to describe Him entirely. It's a blessing and a frustration to many Christians. The first thought on the mind of many who have wrestled with the complexity of God is undoubtedly the Trinity. It has been the first thought on my mind for quite some time now. In the midst of all my recent reflection, a thought came to me earlier this week. That thought has opened my eyes to a very simple yet obvious reality that I've neglected to realize every other time that I've attempted to grasp the concept of the Trinity of God. My hope is that the reader, I said in this, but the viewer here on YouTube, will get a better understanding of how God can be both one God but three separate and distinct persons without being a contradiction. So the answer that I found is actually found at the beginning of Genesis, and it's the first time that we get any picture of God being a triune God, in the sense that He's three persons and yet one God. So the answer is actually found in Genesis 1:26, and I'll read it for you here. It says, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image.'" So let's just focus on that phrase for a second. It says, "Then God said," not "then the gods said," but "then God said, 'Let us make man in our image.'" So right from the beginning, we get this understanding that God, again, not the gods, is one being, yet with distinct persons in that one being, because God, singular, said, "Let us make man in our image." So it seems as though when you say God, it's a monotheistic understanding of God. It's not the gods came together and had this agreement, but God came together and had this agreement that they should make man in our image, it says. So this is where my thought came in. The thought was this, is that if God said, "Let us make man in our image," the best chance we have of understanding God's complexity is in terms in terms of the Trinity is to look at mankind itself. Because if we are made in the image of God, it would make more sense that we would actually be there's something in us or something about us that could help explain the Trinity. And a lot of times I've heard explanations of the Trinity like, well, God is like an apple. He's part skin, part of the flesh of the apple, and part core of the apple, and together they come together to make the apple. But that description, along with one I've heard about water being a descriptor of God because it's a solid, it's a vapor, and it's a liquid. First of all, those are inanimate, objects or inanimate things. They aren't a person, and it's like building blocks of building God in a sense is that argument, because if Jesus is God, if he's fully God, then he can't just be part of the apple illustration or explanation of trying to explain God. He has to be all the apple and also the flesh. So it gets into this really, I think, mixed up description, and I think maybe for kids that might be a good starting point to get them to try to begin to understand the concept of the Trinity, because that there is that 3-in-1 concept, but at the same time it's kind of leading people astray, I think. So, but going back to mankind again, I think the best chance we have of understanding the Trinity is looking at mankind itself, because again, we, according to the Bible, we are made in the image of God. So what is it about man that would help us understand the Trinity? And the best way I thought of to get this point across is to look at Jesus Christ. Christians understand that Jesus was fully God and fully man. Now, when you say he was fully man, what is it that we're saying when we say God is fully man? Are we saying that Christ is mankind in its entirety? That idea of man, like mankind. Are we saying that Christ is mankind when we say he was fully man? Of course we're not. We're saying that Christ was fully human. And what I mean by that is that he carried all of the attributes and the characteristics that made him a human being who paid that price on the cross for us. Now that term man can be understood in two different ways. I can say, I am man, hear me roar, that famous line. And I'm not insinuating in saying that I am all of mankind. I'm simply saying that I have all the components that make me a human being, that you would recognize me as being a human being. So no matter our distinctions physically or in our differing roles as people, we are all equal in our humanity. We were all created equal. So we have equal value in our humanity. Keep that in mind. Now, that second understanding of the term man, and to make the idea of the Trinity easier to understand with this explanation, I want you to imagine there were only 3 human beings on Earth to parallel with the Trinity, or make that easier to understand. So imagine there were only 3 human beings on Earth. Now, if all these men, if man came together in the plural sense and said, let's go to the beach or something like that, you could say, man said, let's go to the beach. And you'd be speaking in the plural sense of the entirety of mankind saying something, but there's that unity and that idea of oneness in saying mankind said this, because they all collectively in harmony came together and had this idea and said, you could say man said let's go to the beach in that example. So in one sense, like when I say I am man, hear me roar, I'm describing the attributes that make me a human being, and in the other sense I'm describing the entirety of humanity while still using that same word, man. So again, man said this is in the plural sense of understanding that. So really all you need to do is apply the first characteristic of Christ that we mentioned, being fully God and fully man, in that same understanding of the term man, but applying that to Christ is fully God. So Christ is fully God, and when we say that, are we insinuating that Christ is God the Father and God the Holy Spirit as well? Of course we're not. we're saying that he carries all of the attributes and the characteristics that make him God in the singular sense of the word, as with man in the singular sense of the word. So we're saying that Christ carries all of the characteristics, the omniscience, the omnipresence, the power of God, all the attributes that make him deity, but we're not saying that he's the entirety of God or God kind, if that makes it easier to understand. But there's that community and that harmony in the Godhead, just like with the explanation I was giving of man saying something collectively. If they all came together and agreed on something, you could say, man said such and such. So when Genesis 1:26 says, God said, let us make man in our image, it was the harmony and the community of the Trinity saying, let's make man in our image. So Christ is fully God in the singular sense. The Father is fully God in the singular sense. The Holy Spirit is fully God in the singular sense. And together they are God in the sense of collectively being all the persons that carry those attributes, that set them apart as God, just as we are man in the sense of collectively being all of the persons that carry those attributes that set us apart as mankind. So we are mankind collectively, and God is God kind is one way of saying it. It sounds awkward, but God is God collectively, just as we are man collectively. So it's not a contradiction. It's finding that unity in diversity, just like the term university is to find unity in diversity. You have distinctions in your nature, in your understanding, and your will as human beings. So there isn't that constant harmony in humanity like there is in God. There is that constant harmony and flow of thought and agreement because there's that perfection in God. So and just going back to what I said before about us all being equally human, God is also equal in the sense that they all have that makeup, they all have that identity, just as we have the identity of being human beings. So it isn't a contradiction. And if that is a contradiction, then saying I am a man and we are man would also have to be a contradiction if you're going to apply it both ways. So the Trinity is admittedly something you really have to reflect on and think on to understand, but when you look at mankind and look at how we are made in the image of God, it actually makes it quite a bit easier to understand, I think. So I hope that explanation helped, and I'm looking forward to any comments on that and what you think of it. So thanks for watching, and I hope you have a good weekend. Thanks.